Please be good. Please be good. Please be good. Wait, that might be too high of a bar to set. Please don't suck. Please don't suck. Please don't suck.
Have you really traveled so many light years to find out?
Mirror to the Sky by Yes. So, Yes shouldn't need an introduction at this point. They're grandfathers, monumental leaders of the prog movement back in the 70s, put out staple albums like Close to the Edge, Fragile, Going for the One, Tales of Topographic Ocean, Relayered, and kind of had a little bit of a rocky road once we got into the 80s, going a little bit more into the pop side of things with Big Generator and 90125. But I feel like when they got back into the 90s, they kind of got their feet back under them with albums like, The Keys, studio stuff, The Ladder, Magnification, and even like into the 2010s with Fly From Here. Man, they are back into that slump with those last two records they put out, Heaven and Earth and The Quest. Whew, those are stinkers. And I would even put, The Quest and Heaven and Earth below some of my least favorite records from them, like Big Generator and 90125, because at least on Big Generator and 90125, there were still some fun aspects to the band, and I don't know, I just felt like it was a death whimper. A lot of that has to do with, I don't know, maybe Yes kind of running out of steam, running out of ideas, which is so interesting because, they're the ship of Theseus at this point. They don't have any original members. I think the only one that's left right now in terms of their formidable age would have been Steve Howe on lead guitars. Everybody else is new or has kind of originally filled in for touring and then has just kind of stayed on with them. Unfortunately, with the passing of both Chris Squire and Alan White, that took, some of the big founding members of the band that made Yes, Yes kind of out of the picture. So the current lineup that we currently have with Steve Howe on lead guitars, a little bit of backing vocals every once in a while. But he's also the first time, I believe, behind the scenes actually producing this record, which I'll get to in a little bit. But Jeff Downs being on keyboards and vocals, and Jeff has been with the band for a while now, so he's kind of he's in familiar territory. John Davidson on vocals, guitars, keyboards, percussion. And again, John has been with the boys, I think, since Fly From Here. He's been one of the main individuals that kind of stepped into John Anderson's role once John Anderson kind of stepped down. Billy Sherwood on bass and backing vocals. Billy, most people know Billy. He helped out with, a lot of stuff in the 90s and into the early 2000s. And then once Chris passed away, he's kind of come in and helped fill the shoes. And then Jay Schellen on drums. And Jay was with the band with touring and really helped Alan out when Alan was running out of steam, couldn't kind of keep up the pace. Jay was coming up and kind of filling in that role. And so Jay has finally kind of stepped in as an official member of the band currently. So that's the current lineup that we have here. And I mean, oh boy, with no founding members left in the band and they kind of running out of steam, I was very, very hesitant about this record, if I'm being perfectly honest, especially when I was reading up on this record, and it seems as though while they were making the Quest and putting the finishing touches on it, they're like, we still have lots of material to go on, and we have got a lot of momentum. Let's capture that and let's keep going, and kind of continued their time in the studio to kind of capture on that. And I mean, the Quest was fine. I liked it a little bit more than Heaven and Earth, but it still wasn't great. And so knowing that same kind of essence, that same kind of energy is coming into this album, I wasn't all that excited about it. But then the first single dropped, Cut from the Stars. And I actually really dug it. I found like there was a lot of breath of fresh air. The thing that made Yes so special to me, those deep harmonizations, that really meaty bass line that Billy always kind of struggled with capturing that same essence that Chris would be putting down, starting to not necessarily emulate, but at least get in the same environment of, because I don't want a clone of Chris Squire. I want Billy to do his own thing. And I always felt like it didn't quite work, but now we're actually starting to get some of that in here. And Cut from the Stars really brought that to the forefront. We've got a lot more harmonizations on here, which I really dug and I really appreciated. Most of the boys are singing on here. Billy Sherwood's, Jeff Downs, and even Steve Howe are providing some good harmonizations to really help John Davidson kind of flush out the sounds and flush out the music. But really it was that musicianship. It was the kind of playing off one another between Jeff Downes on the keyboard and Steve Howe on the guitar. The two playing off one another at the end of this track was really a treat. Like, this was more of what I was hoping for within some Yes tracks. I'm loving that harmonization. The key changes on here are very beautiful. Again, this is why I come to Yes and why they are still one of my favorite bands. It brought me back to some of the best moments that I heard from Tornadoes, that I heard from Going for the One. You'll hear that comparison quite a bit. But more than anything, I'm feeling that really creative spark that I felt within the late 90s, early 2000s with The Ladder and Magnification. That kind of creativity, that taking what worked from the past and rejuvenizing it for the modern times. I mean, if you think about it, Magnification is over 20 years old. You know, like that's huge. And so bringing that music now into the fold, it's you know, they have some young blood into the band. Capture that, utilize that, and I feel like they're finally starting to do that. The other big singles that we had from this, All Connected, the next track, a pretty lengthy one. And that was something that I really did enjoy of this record. So it perked my interest. I got more invested in this. I saw the runtime of these, and that's the other thing that I really want to, praise. This album's runtime is perfect. You got 6 tracks across about 45 minutes worth of music, so you got a full album side on there with 3 tracks as bonus tracks on here. That is how you construct an album for prog nowadays, and I feel like a lot of bands are trying to really cram in as much material as they possibly can, which sacrifices a lot of that quality. I want quality, not quantity when it comes to prog. And having, about 3 tracks that are almost grazing that 10-minute mark, All Connected, Luminosity, and the title track of Mirror to the Stars, all kind of flirt within that 10-minute mark. And All Connected, being one of the other big singles off of this, being just over 9 minutes long, allows the boys to really stretch their legs and really showcase again what brought me to Yes. It's the sophistication of the sounds, it's the overlays of harmonies, how they're going from one sequence of the music to another sequence of the music, and it feels like these boys are finally allowing themselves to create music that fans want to hear, that they feel proud about, because I feel like they were either making music for just themselves that everybody else was just kind of lacklustered over, or like kind of shrugging their shoulders over, being like, well, that's fine but not great, or they were just recreating music that they had already done from the 70s that I would much rather just listen to the stuff from the 70s. Finally, with All Connected, even though it's not as strong as Cut from the Stars, and a little bit of a spoiler alert, nothing really on this album is as good as Cut from the Stars, it still brought me back to what I loved about Yes. And that could definitely be said about Luminosity, the 3rd track, and the first track that hadn't been listened to yet. So Luminosity, I friggin' love, because it was bringing me right back to what I loved about Magnification. They're using this big orchestra to really help pad the music. A lot of these legends of artists, Chris Squire, Alan White, John Anderson, they're all gone, and they had a larger than life presence within the band. And much like when Rick Wakeman kind of left for Magnification, like he wasn't on it, they brought in the orchestra to help breathe that new life into it, to help fill the shoes. I feel like they did that same thing here to help, I don't want to say mask the absence of, those who came before, but at least to help fill that void. And not saying that, the band that we currently have can't do that, but if they want to get that presence, that larger than life, that really big epic sound, they need something special, and I'm not saying that they can't pull it off, it's just I haven't heard them pull it off at this point. So I'm very glad to hear that they brought in a full orchestra for a track like Luminosity, which is this big larger than life track. It starts off very somber, very low key, and gradually builds very similar to how a lot of the tracks from Magnification were. And I love that presentation, and I love that big epic sound, especially by the end of this track, that has this brilliant and beautiful crescendo by the end, with that full string orchestra coming in and providing that big padding that I really, really love. It brought me back to what I loved about Yes and their big epics, because they haven't done a big epic pretty much since Fly From Here. And even Fly From Here was like stitching of stuff that they did during the drama era. So yeah, like I'm glad to see that they're starting to stretch their legs and do some bigger tracks. The fourth track of Living Out Their Dreams for me is probably the weakest track on here, which is a little bit of a shame, you know, because it is the only one that Jeff Downes has some kind of a writing credit on. For most of the tracks on here, it seems like John Davison, Billy Sherwood, and Steve Howe are credited as the main writers and composers on here. And it just seemed really kind of sad that, you know, the only one that Jeff Downes has any kind of a writing credit on is one of the more weaker tracks. And it's weaker in the same sense that, like, I find Parallels being the weakest track on Going for the One is. It's still a really good track. It's just it's surrounded by these really big, really grandiose tracks that I love so much more. It's still very fun. You know, I can hear this on the radio. It's got a little bit more of an accessible, bouncy groove. And I do love some of Jeff Downes' like keyboard work on this, especially when you're getting into that downward scale arpeggios that he has. I really enjoy that aspect of it. It just, outside of that little fun synth aspect to it, I'm not all that drawn into this track. And then we come to the big track, the title track, Mirror to the Sky, almost 14 minutes. And again, much like what I said about Luminosity can be said about this one, it's really showcasing Steve Howe's guitar work on here. It's really showcasing he's able to command the sound, even within his a little bit of an older age. You know, he's coming into the Twilight era. I like the fact that he's still able to command and really bring forth that sounds that we love. I love, again, the use of the orchestra on here. We get that big sound. And more than anything else, I love the ebb and flow of this track. I love how things build up to be scaled back, to be built back up again. Again, this is what I came to Yes for. This is what I love with Tales of the Topographic Ocean and Relayered, where you have those moments that go from one section of the song to another section of the song to another section of the song. Obviously, we're nowhere near, you know, the levels that we had within the 70s within the big epics, but you know, we're starting to graze back again within the ladder and magnification in those longer stretches of music. And I mean, the whole thing kind of comes to a really brilliant and great crescendo by the end. Like, I love how the song kind of dips down, gets really quiet, and then slowly builds itself back up to the use of the synthesizer. And then we come to that really great keyboard work by the end, and I love that final play out by Steve Howe within the guitars. It just kind of like all the boys are working together to really lift everybody up. And then we come to the final piece, at least within the album itself, of Circles of Time, and it's the main track from John Davidson, and it's fine. You know, it's a really pleasant singer-songwriter with a guitar kind of closing piece. It does a really good job of summarizing the album, putting a little bow on it. You know, it does exactly what it needs to do. It might have stuck around for just a little longer than it really needed to be. It could have probably been about, you know, 3.5 minutes rather than close to 5, but it still did a nice job of showcasing that, you know, John Davidson has been with the band for a while now, and it really does kind of showcase his talents within it, and kind of like the heart and soul within the band as well. So, yeah, the 3 bonus tracks are all written and arranged by Steve Howe, and I'm glad that they left these as bonus material, because they're not really as good as the actual core album itself. Unknown Place, 1 Second Is Enough, and Magic Potion, they're all fine. I think Unknown Place is probably my favorite of the bunch, but you can definitely tell they're much more B-side tracks rather than like the full band working together. And really, this is what made Yes so good and so special, was all these different personalities working together to create these magnificent tracks. And when you just have one person working on these tracks, that's where you kind of have, you know, a less than stellar outpour. And as much as I love Steve Howe, I just feel like these last 3 tracks kind of miss that special touch that all the other tracks have. Now, this album still has a little bit of its flaws. As much better as it is than the previous 2 records that came out, it's still not nearly as good as even Fly From Here, Magnification, The Ladder, or, you know, the Key studio album. It's getting back into what I loved about Yes. So, you know, this is kind of on par with, like, say, Tornado, where it's fine, it has some really good tracks on it, but as a whole, it's still okay. It's still okay. It's probably, you know, I think people are going to really, really like this album based on the past 2 records rather than the entire discography of Yes. You know, like, clearly this is nowhere near as good as any of their stuff from the 70s, I would even say this isn't as good as anything from Magnification, Fly From Here, or The Ladder. But, you know, it's better. It's definitely better than Union. I would say that it's probably better than Big Generator and 90125. But that's probably about it. So like the bar to cross isn't that high. And luckily they were able to surpass that. So in that sense, I would say this album is a win. I like this a lot more than I was anticipating or expecting to. But I still feel as though that spark, that thing that I loved about Yes, unfortunately is gone, and all I'm getting is kind of the substitute stuff. You know, it's kind of like being lactose intolerant, no longer able to drink milk, and all I can drink is either almond milk or soy milk. It's fine, it does the job, it gets the cereal down, because I love me some cereal, but at the end of the day, it's still not that milk that I love so much, you know? So what I will say for Mirror to the Sky is, Mirror to the Sky from Yes is one that I would absolutely download. You know, this isn't like Heaven and Earth. This isn't like The Quest where I would say skip it. This is one I would actually recommend checking out. You know, I would feel okay owning this into my Yes discography. It wouldn't be a black mark that those other albums were. Just don't come to this album expecting Close to the Edge. You know, just don't do that. Yeah, so that's kind of what I've got for Mirror to the Sky from Yes. What do you guys think about this record? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's all I got. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.